Hello, Maylin.
Craig, what's up?
Okay, folks, we're still waiting on two of our guest speakers, and as soon as they log on, we will begin. Oh, Cindy, that's you. Okay, let me unmute you. There you go.
Hi, Sasha. Let me get some. How is my lighting? Is it good?
Yeah, we can see you. Okay. I think we're just waiting on one more now.
Yeah.
Yay, I'm not the last one.
I can't get into the meeting. Okay, so she's having a little bit of issues. Give me a second. Okay, so Maylin, why don't you go ahead and start? She's sending me a message. She said she's trying to get in, so let me try get her the the link again.
Sure, no problem. Can you?
Go ahead.
I said sure, no problem.
All right.
But we can give her 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. Let me
give her 2 minutes.
Let me see what I can do. Oh, okay.
There she is.
All right. Excuse me. Sometimes I'm an old man. Let me see if I can find her. All right. See, can you put up your hand so I can find? Oh, you're actually, there you go. Sorry. Old age, you know. All right.
Just unmute her, Craig.
Yeah, she is.
We'll get started. Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. I'm going to jump right in. Welcome to this afternoon's panel, Facebook Club, and Bookstergram, expanding literary communities via social media. I am Mei Lin, Chief of Staff here at UB, but what is more important, I am a book lover, reader, and a writer. And I follow the three women on this evening's panel, and I am really excited to talk books with them. I will try not to be a giggly fangirl. Tonight, we have on the panel Christy, who is a Bahamian living in America. She works as a program manager and academic advisor at Cornell University. She holds an MBA in international business from the University of the West Indies and an MFA in English literature and creative writing from Syracuse University. In her free time, she is involved in the online literary community. Her Instagram page is mainly devoted to posts about the fiction and poetry she reads. And she co-hosts a monthly live chat with fellow Instagrammer, Brown Girl Reading, who unfortunately could not join us tonight and sends her apologies, where they both discuss and answer questions about a book of their choice, which is typically by a writer of color. Next, we have Cindy, who is a Caribbean girl reading the world, a Jamaican living in Trinidad and Tobago. She is a top Goodreads reviewer and hopes to use her platform to encourage you to read more, read widely, and read Caribbean. If you follow her on Instagram and watch her stories, you should be familiar with her famous greeting, "Hi friends," right before she gets into her book goodness. And she has been bookstagramming for over 3 years. Our third panelist is Sasha. Sasha is a bibliophile, social media reviewer, and promoter. She's also an aspiring Bahamian historian. Not only does she post reviews about the works of fiction that she reads, but she posts about Bahamian history books that are must-reads. So before we get started, I just want to remind everyone that this event is brought to you in conjunction with the School of English Studies at the University of the Bahamas, where students can earn a Bachelor of Arts in English or specialize in creative writing, yay, my favorite, Bahamian and Caribbean literature, film and drama studies, or linguistics. And some quick housekeeping. Please keep your mics on mute, but I think Dr. Smith has that covered. And at the end, we're going to have a Q&A session. You can post your questions in the chat or raise your hand to ask them when the time comes. So enjoy the discussion, scribble down the names of all the great books we're going to be talking about. And I am going to jump right in. And because this is on Zoom, just to make it easy, I'm just going to identify the order that I want our panelists to answer in. I'm going to start with something really easy for the three of you, which is when, why, and how did you begin using social media as a way to share your love for books, to share that books are important, and in particular, to promote the kinds of books you are promoting. I'm going to start with Christy, and then we'll move to Cindy and wrap up with Sasha.
Thank you, Malin, for such a really lovely introduction, and thank you, guests, for your patience with me switching devices. I got into, I would say, social media, Booktube, specifically between 2012 and 2014, so not a short while ago, but definitely as a lurker. So at the time, I just moved from the Bahamas to Syracuse, New York, and was deeply cold and lonely, and spent a lot of my free time on YouTube, and fell into a myriad of videos about books. And I was like, what is this wondrous place? At the time, although I will say, the majority of Booktube was ruled by, or at least what came up in my algorithm, British fiction readers, specifically in terms of demographic, white and female. And being in a writing program at the time, I had the question of why am I not hearing more about the books that I'm interested in and that I learn about? And so that was why I decided to involve myself. I think my first video is like very badly done and may have been on, I want to say it was like an intro to YouTube. And then one of my earliest books was on, my videos was on Marlon James's The Brief History of 7 Killings. It was just, I just can't even with what I felt when I read it. And I was just like, I need to get online and talk to the world about this. So that would have been sometime between, I want to say that would have been 2014 or 2015 when I did my first video. And then I just looked for other writers of color to talk about and other social media personalities who themselves were talking about the books that I liked to read. Instagram is fairly recent for me.
Cindy, you're up next.
Hi, friends. Hi, everyone. Thanks for that amazing introduction. I'm like, I need to write this down for when everyone asks me for my bio. I think I started socially. I think people don't recognize Goodreads as a social media platform, but it actually is. So I started from 2012. Someone told me about this magical space that I can go and have like a whole library. And I'm like, what? So I joined Goodreads in 2012. And since then, I've been doing reviews. I've been posting to Facebook on my personal page. And then Instagram came around and I'd usually do like a wrap up on my personal page that would get the usual 5 likes, the same 5 people who are like, hi, yes, it's lovely that you read so much. Thank you. Please stop filling up your feed with books. Where are the carnival photos? Where are the beach photos? Ease us up on the book photos. So I think it was in 2018, I decided, you know what, let me do this thing for real and launch a Bookstergram page. And I think it was once on my personal page, I posted a wrap up and it got like over 200 likes. And I was like, what is happening? How are everyone reading? And then I realized that I hashtag Bookstergram and I'm like, wow, I created a hashtag. People are following me. Only to realize that the hashtag had like over like millions of posts to it. So I'm like, wow, this is a space. Then I went down the Google rabbit hole as to how to start a Bookstagram page, which led to the layout and aesthetic that you should have. And I'm like, this is gonna be hard. First of all, I don't have snow. I don't need long socks. How am I gonna lay out my content? So I just went with what I know, and that is Caribbean content, the sunshine, the sea, and I started off reading regular books. Looking back, it was mostly Caribbean books as well. And yeah, it's just blossomed from there. I think it's really in 2019, 2020 that I kind of like hit my stride and figure out an identity for Book of Sins. And it's been going from there. Yeah.
Sasha, last but not least.
So for me, my first time on social media where I was talking about books would probably be Tumblr in like 2013, 2014. And that community there, this was a large community, but it was mostly filled with like mainly white females. I never really felt like I had found a like solid community like I have on Bookstagram now. And so from Tumblr, I was active on there for about like 2-3 years. And then I tried to transition into Bookstagram like in 2017, but I really got discouraged because I was trying to like have this perfect aesthetic and like layout and I can see Sydney in the corner, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to post about and I couldn't find a community there, and so like I just dropped it. And I was on BookTube, which is YouTube, for a little bit, and the only reason I really stopped doing that because I was doing that from about like 2015 to 2017, but I stopped doing that mostly because when I transitioned from going to high school to college, it's like all my time got sucked up, and my little sister actually broke my camera that I used to use to like film YouTube, so that that she had made me so angry. I was like, I need to stop for a little while. And I did try and start up my YouTube again over the pandemic, but then when I went back to school again, I just don't have the time for it. But during the pandemic, I did start Bookstergram again, and I really found a community and I fell in love with it. And it's mostly in part to Decentered Lit, because we were friends on Tumblr actually way before all of this. And she found me on my personal Instagram and followed me, and we started talking. And then I got introduced to Cindy and a whole bunch of other people. And she really made me want to like start up talking about books again. And so far, like out of all the platforms that I've used, Instagram has been my favorite for talking about books and like connecting with other people.
Awesome. For sure, Instagram is my favorite for following people. I don't know how you keep up on Goodreads, Cindy. I have a bookshelf. I haven't updated it in years.
I literally just updated my to be read shelf. Like I love Goodreads. Like I check it almost as much as Instagram. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
but good weird. Definitely good weird. Okay, so my next question, really easy. I'm going to start with Sasha, Cindy, and then Christy. I just want to know, what are you reading right now?
So I am currently in the middle of Race and Class in the Colonial Bahamas by Gail Saunders. I started that like a week ago. If you're Bahamian, then I'm sure you've probably heard of like Gail Saunders as a historian. I love her books. I love her work. They're informative, but they're also easy to read, because you can find a lot of times like historical books are just like hard to read and get through and bogged down with so much information, but she makes it so like easy to consume.
Awesome. Christy?
So I am always in the middle of multiple books. I'm currently reading, I came ready because I figured you would ask, How the One-Armed Sister Sweeps Her House by Cherry Jones. Also to I do a live similar to Sasha. Dee from Brown Girl Reading pulled me into Bookstergram, and this is the book that we chose to talk about next. So I'm reading that, and I also write, which is very labor intensive. And so I'm recently, I want to say it's been close to 5 years since I've regularly written. And so now I'm reading a book called Make a Scene, which I think is awesome in terms of anybody who's interested in writing long form fiction or short form fiction. I find it incredibly palatable. So those are the two books that I am currently reading in tandem with each other right now.
Awesome. Cindy?
So this morning I finished reading Moving Sideways Like a Crab by Shani Mutu. And I literally, when I say pick this up, because it's a Book of Sins book club pick, and I started reading it and then I came on this call. So I'm rereading it. So I'm like one page in. So this is what I'm reading now.
Awesome. Perfect. Also on my TBR. Now, getting into the meat. I'm going to start with you, Cindy. Let's talk a bit about the important emerging voices in literature across the diaspora, especially in the Caribbean. Who should we be reading? Whose books should we be picking up? Who would you recommend? And why do you think they are so important?
Wow. Meat of the matter. I think that so who we should be reading, I feel like Nicole Dennis Ben is really amazing. I feel the work she does is really good. I've read both of her books, Patsy and Here Comes the Sun. I preferred Here Comes the Sun, but I feel like she has such a great, strong writing of what Caribbean, Jamaica specifically is like. I love that she attacks a lot of the themes that we don't generally hear of motherhood in a different light. So I think she does an amazing job. I also feel like Kai Miller is not emerging, but I feel like he's so slept on. And I really wish a lot of people would read his work. I feel like his use of language, how he's able, I've watched so many interviews with him where he says language is something that he loves and he plays with, and you could see it in all his work. I feel like he has such a strong voice. And every time I pick up a book, I'm like, I feel like I'm back in Jamaica and I'm talking to my next door neighbor. And I love that he does not spoon feed the audience. If you don't know the word, you have to go and Google it or look it up. He's not here for that. And that I pretty much love and enjoy. Yeah, I think those are the two ones that come to mind right now, that I do read or engage with a lot. Yeah.
Sasha, let me know your thoughts. Who should we be reading and engaging with?
Well, for me, I have to shout out a Bahamian author, Janice Lynn Mather. She just came out with her sophomore novel last year, and I'm really enjoying the themes in her book. So both of her books are YA contemporary, Learning How to Breathe, and then the other one is Facing the Sun. She covers a lot of things that are going on in Bahamian society. So like, not child abuse, but in one of her books, the girl is being abused sexually by a man in the house who she's living with, and you'd find that a lot in our society here. And then just dealing with like coming of age things that would relate to like Bahamian girls and stuff like that. I think it's important not only for Bahamians to read and really like see themselves in fiction, but just you can find, I feel like, as a Caribbean person or just as a young woman in general, things that would reflect in the book to you.
Awesome. Christy.
So I'm a short story writer and reader. So I'm going with the short stories here, the short story writers. And as a result, I'm a big literary journal fan because that's typically where I find out about who's who in terms of the Caribbean diaspora. So I have a couple, and I'm gonna start with the Bahamians because Bahamas to the world. Emil Hunt, if you didn't take his workshop, you should have. To any Bahamian writers, is a short story Bahamian writer, and his wife and counterpart, Keisha Lynn Ellis, are both phenomenal Caribbean writers. You can find their work in the literary journal Catapult. Keisha Lynn Ellis's most recent story is in ADA, which is the literary journal affiliated with the Commonwealth Writers Short Story Prize. And of course, Alexa Tolas, who was our Caribbean Short Story Prize winner, and her short stories you can find in Granta. And then Pre is a literary journal that's fairly recent that I love to follow. And Sharma Taylor, who's about to come out with a novel, she's a Jamaican writer who lives in Barbados. She's about to bust, I feel. And so I think so. And then Celeste Muhammad is a Trinidadian writer who's about to bust. Her short story collection is coming out in May. And I found her short story a year ago in the New England Review, which was incredibly, yes, exactly. But I was just like, look at this dialect. And so I'm a big proponent of short stories because I feel like it's the way that I feel like poetry is the purest form of writing because it's so short and you have to get it all right. I feel like short stories are the gateway into long form writing. If you can write a short story, you can write a chapter, which means eventually you can write a novel. So Celeste Muhammad, Shamra Taylor, Emil Hunt, Keisha Lynn Ellis, and Alex Tolas. Get to know them.
Wow, that's a lot. Okay, so Sasha touched on it. I want to talk a bit about YA books, particularly Caribbean YA books, and what our teens should be reading. Tell us who to look out for. I know Sasha mentioned Janice Lynn Mather, who is a favorite of mine. I've read her books and I love them. But I want to know who else is out there that you think we should be reading. And I say we because while it's YA, it's one of my favorite genres. Like I can't stop reading them. They're like book snacks. I love it. I'm going to start with Cindy.
Wow, book snacks. I love that. I am generally not a big YA reader or romance reader. So when I picked up Where the Rhythm Takes You, which is going to be coming out by Sarah Das, she's actually a debut novelist outside of Trinidad. The book is set in Tobago, it's YA and it's romance. So I'm like, not gonna love this. Let me just read it. I read it and it was so cute and adorable, and I felt it was so well done without being cheesy. So I definitely recommend Sarah Dass's Where the Rhythm Takes You. I also read Maria Arnold's book that came out this year. She's actually from Haitian descent, and it's called The Year I Flew Away. It's about this Haitian girl that goes to America, and there's a whole issue of identity, of culture, of belonging. And I felt with a mix of sci-fi as well and fantasy, which was like so well done. Again, I was like, I was not expecting that. So I felt that was well executed. And there's Karen Gittins. Last year, she released When Life Gives You Mangoes. I mean, the title alone was just great. So I do recommend those three. Those are the three that comes to mind right now.
Sounds like we have a convert. Sasha, anyone else that you think we should be reading?
For me, recent reads that I've read and enjoyed would have been Your Corner Dark by Desmond Hall. I got an ARC from some book tour company that I was a part of, and I really enjoyed the storyline. I enjoyed going to Jamaica and really like feeling like I was there, and the characters, everything he had to go through is pretty dark. This whole storyline of it all, and I would recommend that to people.
Awesome. Christy, any YA on your radar?
So like Cindy, I'm typically not a YA reader, but
I love the but.
When I go in, I go in. And so one of the books that I constantly return to, I don't know if this is classified as YA, but I think it straddles. YA is by a Guyanese writer called Unya Campadu. I think Unya doesn't live in Guyana, but she has a book called Buxton Spice that I read years ago. And I keep going back to it just because of the imagery and the way that I think it's a retelling of The Tempest, or there are a lot of, if it's not a retelling, there are a lot of similarities. And then she's of Caribbean descent, but I loved Elizabeth Acevedo's Clap When You Land and The Poet X. I think that it's incredibly important for young Caribbean writers or diaspora writers to be able to see that the way that they talk and construct sentences form itself in a musical way on the page, and that you don't have to tell a story through the traditional and linear structure of writing. And you could do it in verse, or you can do it in full dialect. So those are the two that I constantly return to.
All right, Christy, I'm going to stick with you, and I'm going to ask, what challenges do you face as a bookstagrammer, a booktuber? What are the challenges using social media to share reading and books with the world?
I think for me, the biggest challenge, and I would say it's least challenging with Instagram, because Instagram is such an easy platform to use, but consistency is my big challenge. And also, I would say understanding the audience and what the audience needs, and sometimes not considering the audience, right? Sasha kind of touched on it in terms of getting into it and then getting discouraged, and because you think to yourself, this is what it's supposed to be, this is how I'm supposed to present myself. But work in any form is like sports. It's like a muscle. If you don't use it, you're not gonna get better. You can't expect to start as an expert. And so I would say that my biggest challenge is myself and my idea of what I should what I should present as a bookstagrammer and like what I need to look like as a bookstagrammer, when sometimes it's just in your house with not a good background and you take the picture and you just, because you love the book and you're like, I don't have the time to make this look fancy.
We all can't travel with 15 books like Cindy. Sasha.
Bagel. It's Tobago.
What are your challenges, Sasha?
I just have to reiterate what Christy said. Like, I can get into my own head sometimes with the pictures and the captions and just wondering if that's like what people want to see. But I have to realize, like, this is my account. If I'm passionate about it, then it should translate on screen. And even if it doesn't translate over to the crowd, like, that's something that I want to talk about. So eventually people who are interested in what I want to talk about will come and see it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. And Cindy, tell me some of your challenges.
I have a list.
I love it. I have a list. Let's hear it.
So number one would be getting ARCs. I find that I'm constantly fighting up with publishers to get ARCs. And I just feel like that's something that it's like, I don't understand what else I need to prove to get an ARC that is written by a Caribbean author, set in the Caribbean, and I'm here. Like, I just feel like it's 2021. I should not be hearing about shipping struggles. The other thing is distribution. Yes, I get the ARC. I love the book. I want other people to love it. They can't get the book. They're based in Trinidad. They're based in Jamaica. The book is not there. For them to ship it down, it's so much. It's so expensive. So there's access. So sometimes people are like, I really want to read the book, but can't access it. I can't buy it. So there's that as well. I also have the Instagram algorithm. I think since last year, I've just been like, you know what? I am not fighting up with Instagram. I really cannot be bothered. So because of that, I just like post when I feel like. I also take like a day off because I'm like, you know what, it's a lot sometimes. So I try to take a day off for mental health and to regroup. But there's an algorithm that makes you sometimes feel like, am I like speaking to anyone? Am I shouting in this dark void and no one is hearing me? I think there's some times where I'm like, oh, I wish I could have like to just do this full time. Like there's so much I want to do. So like today I posted a blog and people are like, yeah, we stopped reading blog posts since like 2001. So you're going to have to do a guide. And I'm like, what? Yeah. So there's that whole people who want it on that platform. Like they're not willing to leave the platform at all. And I'm like, fam, tomorrow, Mark can get up and be like, I'm turning off Instagram and what is going to happen. So there's that as well. And sometimes it's literally, and this is me in my head, I try to not take things personally. So whenever I have a book club pick, or if there's a book that I absolutely love and people don't love it, I get so mad. And I'm like, everyone will not love every book you love. So please, you cannot fight this war. You read at least 100 books. It is impossible that everyone is going to love all of them. So I think those
you can't, there's no accounting for good taste. just chalk that up to just be like, if you don't have good taste, I can't help you.
Yeah.
That's it. That's what I'm going to go with.
Awesome. So now that we've talked about your challenges, tell me, what are some of the highlights on your platforms? What do you post and share about the most? And what gets you the most interaction? And what brings you the most joy? We'll just go backwards. Cindy, Sasha, Christy.
Wow. Oh, that's such a nice question. Honestly, I think for me, I post mostly about Read Caribbean or Black authors. So I feel like I go between Read Caribbean, Black authors, and women of color. And I feel like whenever I post about Read Caribbean, I always get so excited. And whenever someone is like, I heard you did this and I went and bought the book, I'm like, yes, people are listening, we're doing this. So I feel like that's what brings me the most joy. I think last year when I started talking about Brianne McIvor's Were There Monsters, and to see literally how that flew off the shelf here in Trinidad, to see that everyone was talking about it. And it was just so amazing to literally see the trend in that, where it wasn't on the shelves, and they were telling me they had to like order more because people were just coming in and wanted to read it. So I feel like whenever people take my Read Caribbean recommendations, I'm like, yes, I'm doing something right here. So that's the major highlight for me.
Sasha?
For me, the highlights of Bookstagram would definitely be the community that I've become part of, the Caribbean Bookstagram community specifically, and then the extension of that. Posts that usually do well for me are actually pertaining usually to my Bahamian history books. For some reason, I mean, I do, when I usually post those, my captions are usually more like thoughtful and like about like different insights I've gained in the book, and like everybody always wants to comment on that and like engage with that, and I'm really excited because those are usually the posts that I find myself to be most excited about anyways to post. So for me, that's like a highlight up here.
Cool. Christy?
So for me, I think it's similar. My posts about fiction, but also my poetry posts. So if I read a poem that like really hits me, I'll get the whole poem and like make the little slide through. And that gets like a ton of well, not a ton, but for me, a ton of like likes and interactions. And the other thing that doesn't always get a lot of viewership, but I love the interaction of, is the live talks. I like to be a part of live talks as an audience. I love to go to like Bookstagram live talks and hear what writers are discussing with Bookstagrammers, what Bookstagrammers are discussing with each other, and to read the comments. I just find that like incredibly enjoyable. And when I started my live with Dee Dee, we had just gone into the pandemic, and I was just like, oh, I need to get serious about Instagram. And she has a much bigger following than I have. And I was like, hey, do you want to do this thing? And she was just like, yep, let's do it. And that's what I love about the community, the way that like, if you are interested in the same thing and there's a platform that can support you to discuss that further, like everybody that I've interacted with thus far has been open to any idea that I've like put forward, and like all my Bookstagram opportunities have come through that, with me being like, do you want to try a thing, or somebody else reaching out to me being like, do you want to try a thing? So that I really enjoy.
So Bookstagram is welcoming. I like it. Okay, so I'm going to stick with you, Christy. Can you share ways that we can build or expand reading communities across the region, especially using social media? And you can take that beyond the region.
I'm gonna talk about the region because I have some ideas about this with home.
She got excited. She adjusted herself.
So social media, like it's just undeniable, for better or for worse. For me anyway, Instagram is a platform that any bookseller, any educator, any librarian should be integrating into whatever it is that they want to promote. I would love to say YouTube, but YouTube is labor intensive in a way that Instagram is not. And so if you don't have a team, or you don't have the resources, or you don't have the time, there are a lot of contingencies that go along with BookTube, that Instagram doesn't have. And so I feel as though, I specifically feel this way about libraries. I'm a big proponent of libraries. I would love to see, and I want to say that I'm saying this in ignorance because I have no idea what the back office work looks like. I would love to see more libraries in the region take part in what Rebel Woman Lit is doing. I would love to see that platform duplicated. I feel like there's a process that can be broken down, and that it's scalable, and that it's duplicate, and that you can duplicate it across the region. If libraries had takeovers by their patrons who are like Instagram takeovers. And it's just like, oh, we're gonna have Cindy take over our library Bookstagram today, and she's going to discuss this, or our children's librarian, and we're gonna talk about children's literature throughout the Caribbean. Or they could use platforms to do a lot of social free outreach programs. And I think Bookstagram and Bookstagram communities and just Instagram in general is a great way to start some community initiatives for a very low cost and at a level of consistency that works for whomever is trying to put it forward. So if you're a underfunded library and you can only decide to do something once every 2 weeks or once every month, so long as you're consistent with it, eventually the people will come, the audience will come. And so I think that ways to promote voices within the Caribbean and also just educate Caribbean readers about the writings from their own region, I would start with public libraries and booksellers within the communities. I don't know if that actually answers your question, but that was the message that I had.
It does. It does. Cindy, you're up.
She's like, I don't care, but I need to get this message across. I've written
Yes.
I agree with Christy. I feel like a lot of the local library does not engage on social media, which is very shocking because it's free. And that is how you get your message out. I think recently I saw the library here kind of like, well, just started an Instagram page, and it's just how do you get the message out? But then you have the library which hasn't updated its West Indian section in so long. So then it's like, okay, well, all right, okay, this is a good start. But as Christy said, consistency is key. And I feel like starting a community, having a book club helps as well. If you have people that's reading the same thing, you might get new information. There's ways to spread knowledge. And I think starting a book club really does help, because I've seen that where people come in and join in and they're excited about it, even though they're not in the Caribbean, they're in the diaspora and they are reading and they're telling people and their friends back home what they're reading. So that also helps to spread awareness. So yeah.
Say that.
Sasha.
I just have to piggyback off of what Christy and Cindy said, like not utilizing social media and it's all of its resources, and to like just promote and talk about like Caribbean voices and different things like that. It's limiting, and you find that you just aren't, like, you don't know what's out there because nobody's telling you it's out there. Like you can't find the voices to, like Cindy, for example, for Read Caribbean, I didn't even realize like how many authors or different books about the Caribbean were out there until I came on social media and Bookstagram specifically, and I saw it. I was like, wow. And I started to read and connect with all of these great stories. So yeah.
Okay, so Cindy, you touched on this a bit in your answer. I want to talk a bit about book clubs. I'm going to start with you. I don't know if the other two panelists are members of book clubs or run book clubs. I am a member of a book club here. I love being in a book club. It is the best thing ever. I have some of my best friends now because of being in a book club. It's awesome to have a group of people to talk books about. I think I see quite a few of them attending this panel today. Hey, book clubbies. And I think for me, as a reader and lover of books, it's just really affirming to be with a group of women. We are women, all of our members are women right now, who just love to read. So talk to me about book clubs, Cindy. I know you run one. Tell me a bit about your book club.
Okay, I love that you said it's mostly women. We have one male that comes like every quarter, and when he comes, we're like, so tell us about the male perspective from this book. And he literally has to talk about the male perspective from billions of men. Like he condenses it in himself. So it's just, I'm like, we need more male. Anyway, so I started book club because I was like, it's great to have this on social media, but it would be great to have something offline. And I started like 2.5 years ago. We read women only, Caribbean women or women of Caribbean heritage, Black women, and women of color. It's generally books that I absolutely love. People may suggest, and I'll take on that suggestion. And we meet. Now we have 2 meetings. So we have meetings for the international readers or people who can meet online. So that's Tuesday evening. And then on Wednesday evening, we have local readers. So we'll meet in person. But because of COVID, we're restricted to only 10 persons. So that means it's the first 10 persons at RSVP. Generally, we have like 20, 25 people coming to book club. So it's kind of like, I guess, sad that we only have to go with 10 people, but COVID. So it's been amazing though. Like the online book club is growing. I was shocked when I tuned in on January and I saw like we had over 50 persons coming to book club, people as far as Ghana. I was like, what is happening? So yeah, that's amazing. I absolutely love it. I feel like you are right. It is great having community. I've made amazing friends from book club. Yeah, and we have this joke where whatever happens in book club stays in book club.
Everyone must have that rule.
So a lot of the book club people that I have, they are like, we don't want anyone else joining book club. And I'm like, that's not how it works. So like they'd be at work and they'd be like, I heard you're going to book club. And they're like, no, I don't go to book club, because they're like, we don't want our coworkers coming. This is my space. And I'm like, so how do you expect book club to grow? And they're like, yeah, it's fine. So it's really, it's kind of satisfying both, but I just love how people take book club so personally.
Oh, I'm not gonna lie, I feel really chastised. My book club has 10 members, and we had a vote about it. Some of us were like, no, we need to grow. We need more members. You know, we meet on a Saturday evening, and it's usually 6 to 11 we usually run. And they were like, no, like we're a core now. We know each other. We know everybody's problems. We like, no more members, no more members. I'm going to tell them, I'm going to be like, look, I spoke to Vince today.
You have to tell them. They will make it the only 10. They will make it now a therapy session. It's no longer a book club if you cannot invite new people. They're like, no, it's fine. Let's not invite. So I'm like, so why am I telling people to come if no one can come?
Yeah,
make sense, people.
they're like, no, we're good. It will be too many voices talking. We won't get through the questions. And I'm just like, what? I'm going to tell them Book of Sin said, and she's a professional. She's a professional book club. Sasha or Christy, are either of you in a book club or run a book club?
So I am not in a book club. I've actually never been in a book club, so I'm a little ashamed to say. I have thought, I mean, I did want to join Cindy's, like the February discussion they were having, because I did have the book, but I wasn't able to due to some other personal reasons. But yeah, I've never been in a book club before.
Join a book club. You won't regret it. Christy?
So my approach to book clubs is based on my interest. So I'm a part of several book clubs. So I am a part of Brown Girl Readings book club. And then I'm a part of a work book club, and that's all educators and educational advising, specifically with a lens on traditionally underrepresented students. So our books are always in service of like how to better support those students. And then I am a part of a community book club, which doesn't meet within the spaces of brick and mortar, but it's an interesting way for me to learn about the ways in which the people who I surround myself by view a book, right? And I particularly joined that community because they don't read books that I necessarily would pick up myself. They don't interpret books in the way that I would necessarily interpret books. And it's a part of the community library. And it is mostly white females, but I'm like, I live in an area that is predominantly white. And I want to know, because I think that one of the reasons why some of people who are parts of book clubs are hesitant to let other people into their book club is because reading a book is deeply intimate. It reveals what is happening inside of you. And I want to know what you think. I do. And so for me, another form of joining a book club is a way for me to understand my community and understand who I'm surrounded by and how they interpret the world and how I then want to react or not react or engage or not engage with that. So right now I'm a part of 3, my local library's community book club, Dee Dee's book club, and then my academic work book club. I'm okay with them all. I don't get through all the books, so let me just lead with that too. Like
Okay.
I become an
Like,
this is probably terrible for students, but I have like a rule of thumb where I'm just like, okay, if I know what happened in the first 2 chapters, the last 2 chapters, and some of the early narratives and last narratives, then I could make this work. Like I could like.
Cindy is horrified. Like what?
Because like let's think about it. Like is anybody on here a teacher? You know the introduction is important. The conclusion is important. The topic sentence is important. If they're not strong, they're not strong, ask yourself. Go back and read some of your books. Ask yourself. I'm just saying.
I understand. I used to tell my students.
This is Christy for book club.
Sometimes like I can't lie. Like sometimes I'm just like, this is painful. Like I can't read any more of this.
Facts. I always tell, do not waste your time on a bad book. It is not worth it. Life is short. I agree. Don't waste your time on a bad book.
I like what I like. And sometimes I'll leave with that. I'll be like, look, I only read half the book. Like you should know. I didn't.
By half, I mean the middle, the start, and the end.
You know what? That accrues to half.
Yeah, that's half.
Yes.
That's half. Christy was ambitious. There's no way I could be a member of 3 book clubs. I know I wouldn't get through it. I understand what you're saying about educators though. I used to tell my students, if your intro paragraph and your thesis statement is strong and there are no grammatical errors and your punctuation is perfect, and I read that second paragraph and you're blowing me away, I mark faster. I swim through it. Now, if I start,
the C- paper is the worst because it's good enough where you have to read it all and you have to read it close.
I have to pay attention. I'm just like, why, kids? Why? But no.
The F paper is easy too. I'm like, this is not good, and I can tell. But the C- paper is where I get my trial, and I feel like that about the books too. The C- books, I'm like, Lord,
there are fights.
I'm just saying.
So, I want to talk a bit about how much we read. So we know Christy is reading about half of the books she's reading.
I read all of the books straight through from beginning to end that I like, which is most.
But how much are you actually reading? I like to tell people, oh, I'm an avid reader. I read a lot. And I think if I read 50 books in a year, I'm good. And then I'm not going to lie. Cindy shamed me when she did a photo shoot.
I
was like, and the thing about it is, Cindy's post, like she started her day with 3 things today. And, she's going to church and she's running and she's doing this. I was like, when this gal is find time to read books? But she's reading them. So Cindy, tell me a bit, tell us how many books you read on average in a year and how are you reading so many books?
Wow. First of all, 3 things today. I always tell people, do not compare because my lifestyle literally allows for me to read as much. I don't have children. So if you don't have children, you should be able to read at least 50 books. If you do have children, cut that by half. And if you have 2, cut that by half again. But I read generally between 100 and 150 a year. And I read.
See? Go on, Cindy.
So I read at least 2 to 3 hours daily. If the book is really good, I'd read more. On weekends, I read a lot longer, depending on my social activities, which is not a lot because COVID. And yeah, my thing is that I know what I like to read. And while I do venture into things I don't know about, I generally research a lot before I read. I'm like, will I like this? What is this about? Before I start reading it. And that's how I kind of go through, because if the book is really good, I don't want to put it down. So there's some days where I literally, a Saturday where I'll just spend the entire day reading because the book is that good. If the book is bad, that also forces me to read because I put it down and pick up something else. And so it's just a vicious cycle. But my thing is my lifestyle allows for it. And I do put aside time. So it's not like I get up and I'm like, well, if I get around to reading, I generally say, you know what, Cindy, you need to read at least 2 hours a day kind of thing. And because I enjoy reading, it doesn't feel like it's a task. So yeah.
So it's definitely a priority for you to read. And
yeah, and I enjoy reading. Like I want to get through all of this. Also, I detest, it gives me anxiety to see my TBR shelf. Like once it's getting a lot, I'm like, okay, we're just gonna have to take the entire week off and read this because.
Okay, Sasha, tell me about your reading and your reading habits.
Well, last year, definitely because of the pandemic, my reading sped up a lot more. I think I read 97 books for the year, and that was I was trying to hit 100, but it was close, so I wasn't even mad at it. But that was above average for me from the past 2 years, because when I had started school, just balancing school and reading was really hard for me. So on average for my freshman and sophomore year, I'd only been reading between 30 and 50 books. This year, I feel like it's going to be a good reading year. I'm not sure at the moment, but right now I've been averaging 8 books per month. So on total right now, I've read about 22 books. Actually, I'm on my 22nd book for the year already. So I'm pretty pleased with how it's been going, as long as I don't run into a slump or anything like that. But I definitely agree with what Cindy said, finding books that you know that you're going to want to read and actually like to read, because I don't really venture out. I mean, I do venture out into genres that I haven't read before, but I love the genres that I live in, which are historical fiction, YA fantasy, nonfiction, different things like that. Those are my bread and butter. Those are what I enjoy.
I totally understand that. In my book club, we each pick a book, and I have been forced to read for the last 7 years thrillers. I do not enjoy thrillers at all. And that is the month that I struggle at. It's just like, oh Lord, a thriller. I just read one. It was the worst thing ever. But Christy, tell me about your book reading habits, or a little more about them.
So I don't track, but I would guesstimate that I read anywhere from 4 to 7 books a month if I had to. I've always been a super reader, but full disclosure, I have a stepson and a daughter, and I commute to work. Well, pre-pandemic, I commuted to work, so I'm typically duplicating my reading experience, because I do think, sorry for all the Luddites out there, I do think that there's something that you don't get if you don't see the writing on the page. So a lot of my reading when I was working at the brick and mortar university that I work at happened in the car. And then again, when I got home, I would reread the chapters, because especially if it's a certain type writer, and I usually know my writers. If I know a writer is given to a bullet point, especially with poetry, or as it looks a certain way spatially, I want to see it on the page. So a lot of the ways in which I get to read is because some of it is through Audible, and then I'm just going back to the hard copy to make sure that I didn't miss anything when I like visually. So that's a way. And the other way is efficiency. So the book clubs that I'm a part of, I'm always trying to get them to read the same book. So it's like, oh, I read for both, but I only read one book. So, that's another way that I try to find like efficiencies so that I can consume all of the writing that I want to consume. And the other thing too that I said earlier is I read a ton of short story collections and short fiction. And I don't know that I wouldn't add reading literary journals or dipping into a short story collection to the books that I read if I'm thinking about novels. So for me, I'm always reading, like I'm reading daily. I can consume 2 to 3 short stories daily because a short story is like 20 minutes, you know, and sometimes that's all that I have the bandwidth for. And so that's another way that I make sure that and for me, reading is important, right? I'm more articulate because I read, I understand the world better because I read, I understand different perspectives because I read. And so that is how I keep up with my reading.
Awesome. So just a quick question, because you touched on it, to ask everyone, do you prefer an actual book or do you prefer
the book is better. The book is better. The book is always the best. It just is. Like I retain it better unless you are a fantastic audio reader. Like I read and I listened to The Prophets recently, and I would say that the audio version of The Prophets, it's outstanding. Every so often I'll get an audio version where I'm like, this is amazing. The audio version of White Teeth, if you haven't read it, and or The Poisonwood Bible, also outstanding. But that doesn't happen often. I prefer the book.
Cindy, do you have a preference?
Well, not really. I go between my Kindle and my book. The only thing with my book is that I can because I not only read by time, I read by pages. So I'd like block off and I could physically see I'm getting close to how many pages I need to go to. Also for Bookstergram, it's very visual. So me trying to take a photo of my Kindle is just not it. So that's the only reason why I'd be like, you know what, I need a physical book. But if I had to choose, I would say I prefer a physical book, but I do read on my Kindle a lot.
I also read on my Kindle.
Yeah.
Sasha.
I definitely prefer physical books I like having the feel of the book in my hand and being able to see like my progress. I have been finding myself reading more ebooks this year though, because I can just have it on my phone. So instead of scrolling social media, I'm like, let me hop over to like my Kindle app or my library app and let me just start reading a book. But I definitely prefer physical books.
Okay, good. I want you all to know that you answered the question correctly, and I was going to judge. Anyone who said,
this is just
my reader.
The other case for books that I have, just quickly, is writing is hard. It's like incredibly hard. It's a labor of love. It's a big endeavor. Buy a book. That's how writers get paid. Go ahead. Buy that $14 book. What went into that $14 book is just as much of a labor of love as the $500 painting or the building. Buy the book.
That I definitely agree with. And then your point about how things are laid out on a page. I write poetry and I read a lot of poetry and they never translate well on an ebook for me. And so I always prefer physical copies of books. And if it's a series or an author I really like, it must be a hard copy. Well, two copies are required. A hard copy for my shelf and then a paperback for, the regular reading. The hard copy is like,
I'm not even going to question that because I know that. I know it.
I buy them both.
This lives in a mansion because where do you find the shelf space?
I don't have the shelf space. That's sad. I literally have piles of books on my floor under my bed because if it's worth it, like hard copy and then paperback for handling. paperback for handling.
There are levels. Apparently, I just found out that there are levels to this, and I haven't reached that level. Okay, noted.
So I want two things from you now. I want your favorite Caribbean author, and then a favorite author who you think,
Lord.
not who you think, but who has impacted your life in some way, or who writes so well that you keep revisiting them and you have to share their name and their work.
Just the one?
No, man, I mean, you know, I know one would be hard for me. So, I mean, if you 8, is that a good limit? Because Cindy's like, I have 20 to start. So yeah, that's it. She has a list. I love it. So let's see where we go. I'm going to start with Sasha.
Oh, Lord. So for me, Caribbean wise, I almost feel like I haven't read enough to like specify a favorite, but as of right now, it's definitely between Edwidge Danicat and oh Lord, who's the author of Annie John? Oh, Jamaica Kincaid. Yes, it's between them two. I've actually only read one book by them a piece, but those books that I've read have touched me like so much. I do want to pick up more of their work though, but it's just been like time and money. Definitely for another favorite writer of mine's, this is just stemming back to like my childhood and somebody who I always return to read their books, and like somebody who I like want to collect all their works would be Ellen Montgomery, the author of Anne of Green Gables. When I first read Anne of Green Gables, I was about like 9 or 8, and like her writing style and just the whole story really touched me and really got me into reading like more and more. And like, I just enjoy her books. When I come back to them, it's like a little piece of home, and like they all have a little something in them that reminds me of why I love reading.
Okay, Cindy, let's hear the list.
Wow. First of all, as a reader, I cannot believe you'd ask us for one person.
Exactly.
So these are some of my favorites. I would say Camilla Edwidge Danticat. I cannot have enough of her work. I think she's the queen of short stories. And
yes,
I just feel like she has such a grip on Haitian culture. And whenever I read anything, I feel like I'm visiting Haiti, and her writing is just always so well done. I love Olive Senior. I love Zalika Benta-Reid, Cadwell Turnbull, Marlon James, Nicole Dennis Ben, Marcel Vera, Brian McIver. And an author that I always go back to, or I always recommend, is Alexia Arthurs. She wrote How to Love a Jamaican, and it is one of my absolute favorite collection of short stories. And I just felt like she did such a great job of capturing Jamaican culture. And it was just, also, I'm just a great reader or lover of short story collection. And that was just so well done. So, yeah.
Are you sure that's it?
Hold on, let me go to my life project. And the final answer, yes. Leonie Ross, that is it.
Okay. Christy?
So most recently, I looking at and hoping for the next book from, who wrote These Ghosts Are Family? I adore that book.
Yes.
She's a librarian as well.
Maisie
Hart. And she's a librarian. Sorry, my phone just fell. She's a librarian. So I love her perspective. I love the fact that she's a nonlinear writer. And I love the argument, whether you're for it or against it, that These Ghosts Are Family can be seen as a collection of short stories or a novel. Whichever one you fall on, the fact that the argument is there to be had, I really appreciate that fiction writers from the Caribbean are starting to be recognized for something that I think that they've done for a long time with the novel and the short story, which is play with the form So, of course, Marlon James, specifically the Book of Night Women. While the brief of History of Seven Killings was outstanding to me, the Book of Night Women was the first time that I was really shocked that the writer was a man writing in a female voice. I felt like he did that. Like he really did. Kai Miller actually is another one who like can go there as well. Of course, Olive Senior. Alicia McKenzie, I feel doesn't get enough play. I love her short stories. She just wrote
A Million Aunties.
yes, but she has like Satellite City, which is fairly old, which I really love. And then for better or for worse, I remember the first time I read Junot Diaz's The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde.
Yeah.
And when I read The Brief and Wondrous, I first read the compressed version as like a short story. Sometimes the New Yorker will do this. They will take a novel and compress down all of its best moments and put it as a fiction publication, as a short story. So that's when I was first introduced to it, only to find out that it was a novel, and I read the entire novel in 2 days. And I was like, oh, here are all the men I love from the Caribbean who've done me badly and done me well. And it made a huge impression on me. In terms of books that I regularly go back to Zadie Smith's White Teeth. I don't know how she did what she did as a writer at such a young age, but she managed to get what it means to be from multiple diasporas in a Western country down. She managed to get historical fiction in there. You learn about Jamaica, you learn about Southeast Asia in there. She managed to capture the voices of multiple identities with race. And I just always go back to be like, how did you do what you do? And also Barbara Kingsolver. I tend not to like to read books about Africa written by individuals who themselves are not from the continent or other countries in the continent that they are writing about. But the way in which Barbara Kingsolver writes about the Congo and what happened to the Congo in the 1960s with Patrice Lumumba, which very much was in the background. It wasn't a political novel. I found outstanding. Also, I like to see religion done well in a novel, and I think that she did it well in the Poisonwood Bible. And then Elizabeth Strout has a short story collection called Olive Kittredge and then Olive Again. And I go back to those short stories all the time because I find that the character Olive isn't a likable character, but she's a good person. And that's hard to happen on the page in a simple town. And it's a small town. And I like to read about small towns because I'm from a small town. And so those are my Caribbean go-tos, and then my wider go-tos.
Awesome. So I'm now going to open the floor for some questions from our guests. Guests, you can feel free to type them in the chat and I'll read them. You can address them to the panel or to a panelist in particular, or you can simply raise your hand. I think I don't know, Dr. Smith, do you have that feature enabled?
Yeah, they can raise their hands.
Awesome. Or you can just raise your hand and ask the question.
You'll have to unmute them.
Okay. So do we have any questions?
Or as a matter of fact, I can just go ahead and unmute.
Don't be shy. We're family now.
Can I ask a question, Malin?
Go ahead.
Thank you all for being here and for accepting the invitation. One of the things that you brought up, I think Cindy brought up that there was one guy that would come once a month to the book club. And as we can see from the panel, we have an all-female panel, which is great. However, I'm wondering, what can we do to encourage more young men, young Black Caribbean men to engage in reading, in the love of books, to find the joy that you guys have when you talk about reading and books and whatnot. What can we do you think, to instill this joy into our young men?
My God.
The silence.
So I have some ideas. I think, first of all, before you could even get somebody to understand that they can see themselves on the page, right? Because for me, that's how I got into Caribbean writing and reading. In particular, I was just like, oh, here I am, like finally here I am. You know, like if anybody's watched Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, The Danger of a Single Story, like most Caribbean readers, I read white narratives first, and then I found myself in other narratives. But before I could find myself in other narratives, I had to actually make it to the page.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to what I said about local booksellers and local libraries. And I think UB is doing it with these community forums where you have to put it there for them to even see that they like, oh, here's the thing that I can read, you know, and then you have to make it engaging, which is easier said than done. But I think at this point, if we want young Caribbean males to come, we have to take it to them, because our structures aren't set up for them to find us. So we have to find them first, or we have to find them where we know that they exist, and we have to meet them at their level. And we have to also accept, can they read? Can they read properly? Are they writing well grammatically? And we just have to accept them where they are and then build. That's the first part. And then the next part is we have to show them themselves in the pages that they're reading.
Cool.
Yeah,
Anyone?
I think Christy answered the question, but I think part of why I think Read Caribbean is so important and why I love talking about Read Caribbean is because whenever I get a response from someone who's like, oh, I didn't know this existed, or I read Frying Plantains and I could see myself as someone who left Jamaica and went to Canada. She was literally writing my exact story. Or someone is like, love her. You're like, so that for me, when people are like, I read this book, what are the other million of other books that exist that's out there? Which is why I just love pushing the Read Caribbean narrative, because once people see themselves on pages, they kind of don't want to leave, or they see their neighbor, their family, or their mother, their father, which is why I think what you said, having a space and creating awareness that there's this space or this whole literal library of books waiting to be read. But everything else that Christy said attached with this.
Any thoughts, Sasha?
I definitely agree with both Sydney and Christy. I also think that a lot of times reading is seen as more, I don't know, feminine in a way. It's not seen as something like men, like, or you don't usually see it. If you don't see it in your community, then perhaps it's not like attainable for you. And then also just finding, like Cindy was saying, books that relate to you, things that you actually like to read. I feel like that's so important. I think especially in schools, a lot of times, like, some of the books being pushed on students are not something that's enjoyable. So therefore you associate reading with things you don't like.
Yeah, I agree, which is why I don't like poetry.
Wow, Cindy.
I have to let you know what the author is trying to say through this simile. I'm gonna scream. Why didn't she say it? Why do I have to tell you? Yeah, I still get flashbacks to high school.
Okay, but you're gonna be my work in progress. I'm just gonna start recommending books.
Sometimes I will say this, sometimes you have to find your way in through someone else, right? Because I will say, and the person who's on this call will know who I'm talking about, that I got into poetry, not because of a teacher, but because of who I sat next to in English. And
Look, I wasn't going to
because
embarrass you, Christy, but look what I found the other day. It's a picture of us in high school.
and so Malin adored poetry. And you know what? Also my mother, they both love poetry. And so it's not my form, it's not my genre, but I have a love for it and an appreciation for it because people who I cared about and appreciated their opinions of packaged it in a different way than the teachers that I had. And so I would say also, Craig, to your point, for individuals who have young males that they care about in their lives, the way that they listen to you or they see you, what you put in front of them, they might hear you in a way that they might not hear somebody else. And that too can be impactful.
Very. So, more questions. At what age did you fall in love with reading? From Crystal Stanford. Tell anyone can start. For me, it was the age I was 2.
I think I started reading from a pretty early age. I don't know the age, but I felt like books were always around the house. There's always a Daniel Steele book, a Eric Jerome Dickey book, a Terry Macmillan book that my mother had that she was reading. So I just always was a reader since I know myself.
For me, books have always been in my life. I was homeschooled, so like we would always have a huge library. And I'm not exactly sure what age I was able to read fluently at, but my mom said I would be bored, so I'd just pick up the books that she was using to teach me how to read and just start reading them myself. So I think it must have been around the age of like 5 or 6, and from there on, it's always been like that.
Awesome.
So I came to reading, I would say like the enjoyment of reading pretty late. Like I wasn't an early fluent reader. Like some of my not very great memories in primary school is knowing that like I struggled with reading, but I always loved story. And my mother would make up these stories when we were little about, now I realize as an adult that was based on her time in high school. And she would read aloud to me poetry and the books that she loved. And so I don't think I got into like, oh, I'm going to read this book and get like super consumed by it until grade 5, actually. I have a very clear memory. I got into this, it wasn't the Babysitter's Club, but it was like the version, maybe it was like the like Babysitter's Club Light, this stuff called Girl Talk, which by the way, I still own the entire collection of those books. And I adored them, but then what I did was backpedal to all of the books that I did love, that I struggled with, and it just like took off. So I fell in love with reading much later than I fell in love with story, which happened very early.
Okay, cool. What do you think, this is from Lucinda Clark, what do you think or do you care about US literary markets? For anyone who wants to answer that. If you can.
So I think about this. I think about the writing industry in general. And I don't think that you cannot, I don't want to say you cannot care, but if you're interested in books, and you're interested in books from a region where, like Cindy talked about, it's hard to get the books based on the book distribution, or you have problems in terms of booksellers wanting to send you the books because they can't ship it, but they want you to promote the book and talk about the book, you have to think about the market. And you can't think about the market without thinking about systems, and you can't think about systems without thinking about who runs the systems. And so in terms of whether or not I care in as much as I want to see more people who write the books that I like and who read the books that I enjoy and who write the stories of people who look like me in charge of the systems in larger countries like America or the UK. Like I care in as much as I will put my energies and efforts into agitating to get more people who look like people from my region and people from the identities that I come from in the system, in the places of power, so that the balance is tipped in favor of the writers and the readers that I want to connect with.
I agree with that.
To your point, I feel like I care when you have to care, or not that you have to care, but because I don't like anyone telling me I have to, but I feel like if you're engaged in this space, you kind of have to, because a lot of the books are published by US public publishers, especially Reed Carabin authors. Most are by US publishers. And yes. I feel like I care a lot more when they don't get it right. I'm like, they're not marketing it right. Whoever edited this book did not do a good job to the author. Why are they using the Caribbean to promote it when it's not even set in the Caribbean? The character didn't even visit the Caribbean. Like I care about things like that. Like those things kind of enrage me. Sometimes I'll be like, you know what, it's fine. They're trying, the author, it's not the author's fault, it's a publisher. But I just feel like it's something that you have to care about if you care about Caribbean literature and Caribbean language and how the Caribbean is being portrayed and Caribbean author. It's something that you have to care about because that's where a lot of our books are getting published.
Okay, so Kiki asks, how do we get more Caribbean readers to engage with our own publishers in our home countries, especially since they don't have the marketing dominance of the global North core?
I think, so I feel like there's like levels to Bookstagram. Like, I feel like you start out reading like white thrillers, then you're like, oh wait, there's a whole other like element to this, and you start reading like Black people, and you're like, oh wait, now you have to read local, then you have to read own voices, then you have to read indie publishers. Like I literally feel every single year there's a next bar, and I'm like, y'all need to just let me know where the finish line is. But I absolutely agree with Kiki. This is something that literally came to my attention last year, whereas like I'm not engaging with a lot of indie publishers. And I kind of saw that, I thought about it, how do I promote indie publishers on my platform? And I think one way I do it is that I really do reach out to the publishers who can send ARCs, because there are a lot of indie publishers that can't. Who can, I will ask for the ARC and I'll read and promote it. Brian McIver is actually from an indie publisher, so I made her book a book club pick. I've made other independent publishers book club picks, and that's how I draw awareness. If I'm asked on a larger platform to talk about books, I generally talk about a book that's published by an independent publisher. So I went on a podcast and they asked me to recommend 2 books, and one I made sure to recommend was an indie published author. And it's just drawing awareness to it. I think for Read Caribbean Month, that's something that I actually want us to focus on as well. How do we start talking more about Caribbean publishers? So that's how I feel, because people, and I think like the lay person is like, what? We just want to pick up one book and read it. Me not really business, but for the people who are like more into the whole space, we are called to be more, I guess, we are called to be more conscious of what we're promoting and who we're promoting it to and how we're using our platform. So that's how I can answer this question.
So some of it too, in terms of publishers in the region or publishers outside of the region who promote regional voices, call them by their names. Support P. Paultry Press. Support Poinciana Paper Press, which is by our own local Sonia Farmer in the Bahamas. Support Akashic Books. And then, because I do love the literary journal, remember that presses aren't just publishers of books. They're publishers of writers before writers even get publishing book deals. So read read The Caribbean Writer, read Wasafari or Wasafari, depending on how you pronounce it. Read literary journals that promote the Caribbean writers that you like. And if you don't know about the press, or you don't know about how your Caribbean writers started, we have Google now. Do the research, right? Like open up the book and say, what was the press for this book? And say, oh, if I loved this and they published this book, what else do they publish? Or what did this writer write before this book? Did they write short stories? Chances are they did. Chances are those short stories were published somewhere else. Does this writer only write fiction? Do they write nonfiction? Do they write poetry? Poetry is a landscape of independent press, right? So if you love poetry and if you love a poetry publisher, make a note, because it's like a mind map, right? Like, and it's like Cindy said, there's the goalpost is always changing. What somebody with a platform could, should, will talk about is constantly evolving. And I'm a big proponent of the fact that I'm not the kind of reader that doesn't expect to do work. I don't expect for my writer to spoon feed me. I don't expect for my Bookstergrammer to spoon feed me either. There's some information that you have. I'm not trying to be, I'm just saying, there's some information that you have access to that you might not even know you have access to. So here's how we access it. What are the literary journals? Who published this book? And then share them yourselves, right? For anybody who has social media, promote it for your region and for the people that you care about and for the writers whose voices you feel need to be amplified.
I definitely say I'm one of those lazy people who sometimes like to be spoon-fed. No, I tease.
This is me. I need to find a spoon. I should get up and get a spoon. Me coming to Instagram every day.
Yes.
Just open up.
It's nice, right? Like how do stuff have like Cindy, I'm not like a bunch of stuff I find through you.
Yes.
But I'm also that, I will say this, I'm also the kind of reader where, like, if it's an online journal, like I want to know who commented. Like I want to read the comments to see, especially if Cindy's like, what are you reading? I scroll through the comments, because it's just like, here's how I find out about something that Cindy herself might not even know, right? Like, or like I'm nosy like that. Like you're not just gonna throw me a piece of gossip and then I'm not gonna try and find out who you found that out from, and then I'm gonna try and find out what it is that they told you, because I may not find out a little bit more. And so some of it is just like nosiness and sleuthing.
Well, this spoon-fed kid.
People, the questions I get asked, I'm like, I can't. People message me to ask me what is duppy, and I'm like, this is where I draw the line.
Okay, no, that's
like I have to draw the line somewhere, and this is the line that I'm gonna draw. You need to go to Google. You need to go to Google. Pam, no.
I don't like to be spoon-fed that much, but another bookstagrammer I follow, she's Guyanese who grew up in the Bahamas and is now living and working in Jamaica as a physician, Night Reader, 1988. Mm-hmm. She often promotes Blue Banyan books.
Yes.
And so for me, like, that's how I discovered them. And I was like, oh, and then they have so many. So I'm like, oh, I can support them. I can read them. So that kind of spoon feeding. No, I don't need, you don't need to be a dictionary for people.
Yeah, and to mention your point, like, I love that Gail made her 2021 bookish goal was to read all of the books in their publication. I'm like, this is an amazing goal. And this is things that you can do, back to Kiki's question, to promote the press and use your platform.
All right. Okay.
Hey, Maylin, let me just interject. So we have maybe about another 15 minutes on this panel, because we know we have the poetry contest final that's going to start at 6. And so we have 2 more questions in the chat. And I believe, Candace Sinclair, I believe you're the one who had your hand up. I just want to make sure the person.
She did.
Okay, cool. So she wrote a question. So yeah, let's just give the panelists the last 2 questions, and then they can wrap up with final thoughts.
Awesome. Okay. So Candace Sinclair, this is specifically for you, Sasha. She wants to know, she's a university student who is looking into continuing in higher education. She wanted to know, how do you use your Instagram/YouTube to aid your academic career?
Oof. Okay, for me, I use it to find books, specifically nonfiction books that I'm interested in because my undergrad degree is in history and I'm going to get my master's in history. So specifically just usually in the timeline that I'm looking for, I definitely want to use my Bookstagram to connect more with other historians and different things like that. I've actually found some on Bookstagram who are also avid readers who I follow. And then actually thanks to Kiki on the Zoom, she talked about requesting books from university presses. And so like I've been trying to do that for nonfiction books specifically that I'm interested in. Actually today I did that and just got a response from one university press specifically for Bahamian folklore that I'm interested in. So hopefully like that's how I want to use my platform and continue to use it.
Awesome. And last question, can anyone recommend a book where the MC experiences an identity crisis about their Caribbean roots?
I would think I would go with The Year I Flew Away. I think that book literally dives into the whole identity and Caribbean-ness. The main character moves from Haiti to the US, and she tries to give up her accent because people are teasing her about it, and she loses a lot of her culture. So I think the author did such a great job about how to hold on to your identity and essence while in another space. That is one that was well done, along with Zelika's Frying Plantain. I feel like that was well done as well. This young girl, she straddles between Jamaica and Canada, and she doesn't really get to fit into any of those worlds because she's not Jamaican enough and not Canadian enough. So those are 2 ones that I would recommend.
Anyone else?
I would echo Frying Plantain. I haven't read The Year I Flew Away, so I'm about to put that on my list. And you know, this comes at it a little bit sideways because it really focuses on motherhood, but Nicole Dennis Benn's second book, the first Patsy, I think the ways in which the mother in that novel has to deny herself and her selfhood from what she left behind to what she goes to when she leaves the Caribbean and goes to America, I think really hones in on several types of identity, one of which is the identity of where you come from. The other is, of course, the identity of motherhood. So I would strongly recommend, and in general, I would just recommend Nicole Dennis Benn. And I'm trying to think of another one. This isn't a direct Caribbean writer, but the short story collection, The Lives of Church Ladies by Disa, deals with identity in a different way. It's not about countryhood, but it's about personhood. And Disa's a Florida writer, I'm pretty sure of Caribbean descent. And that's another one to look into.
Awesome. And we have another recommendation from Kiki, An Escape to an Autumn Pavement by Andrew Salke. Well, sadly, as much as I've enjoyed this, we have come to the end of our time together. I really enjoyed it. I hope everyone did too. I think you did. Especially, I know Lucinda did, because I see her face and she's like nodding and yes. And so that was nice to see. I want to thank our panelists, Christy, Cindy, and Sasha, for discussing and sharing everything books with us. And I just want each of you to give our guests just your final thoughts on books and reading Caribbean and reading the diaspora. I'm gonna pick on Cindy because she's like, wow.
As Trini poet Shivani Ramlochan so aptly puts it, when you read Caribbean, you read the world. And I just feel like that just basically sums up the work I do, the work that a lot of Caribbean writers do, and Caribbean bookstagrammers. We're here preaching the Read Caribbean message. It is so important that we engage with Caribbean literature and Caribbean author and talk about it and create awareness for them, because they're doing so much good work is being done in this space. And I just cannot, like, I'm dying to see what 2021 brings, because it's going to be amazing. So yeah, Read Caribbean comes up in June. That's the month that we literally read Caribbean, and I cannot wait.
Sasha?
Could you repeat the question again? For some reason, it just went out of my mind.
Like, break time. No, I just want you to share your final thoughts with us. You know, yes.
Okay. I just definitely suggest to everybody to just pick books that you enjoy. I feel like reading widely is a huge thing that everybody should be doing. I've always tried to read outside of my like sphere of knowledge, and I think that's important for everybody to just grow and learn and like be able to identify with other people and like empathize with people especially. And I do think it's important whether you read a sentence a day, a chapter a day, a word a day, just read something.
And Christy.
So I would say for the readers out there, the ones who like love reading, find a way to touch the work every day. Like Sasha said, a sentence, or whether, and don't limit yourself to what you think engagement with the written word might be, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, sometimes engagement is Sasha or Cindy's page or another Bookstagrammer's page. And create the community that you want to see. And that doesn't have to happen in big or small ways. If you're already a part of a community, if you're embedded, if you're a part of your church, what would it look like to suggest a book club as a part of your church? Or if you're interested in social media, start off like me, be a super lurker for years and follow a ton of Bookstagrammers or YouTubers, or join Goodreads. Just engage with what it is that you want other people that you care about to engage with, and what you want to see more of, right? Be curious and be open to ways in which you can feed your curiosity, because that ultimately is what social media with books has done for me.
Awesome. Okay, well, again, thank you, ladies. It was an enjoyable way to spend the last about hour and 45 minutes. For everyone else, including you three, if you are interested in learning more about English studies at the University of the Bahamas, please contact Dr. Mayuri Dika at mayuri.dika@ub.edu.bs, and she will be happy to give you any information you want about the wonderful program we have in the School of English Studies. If you want to stay connected with the Blue Flamingo Literary Festival all year, you can join our Facebook page. And don't worry, I'm going to drop all these links in the chat. It is BF Lit Fest on Facebook, or you can follow us on Instagram at Blue Flamingo Literary Festival. So I'd like to say goodbye to everyone, and I want to invite you to come to the next event, which is the first annual Blue Flamingo Literary Festival Poetry Contest Awards. We have 2 poets featured. They are 2 of my favorite Bahamian poets. I'm a little biased here. The first is Sonia Farmer.
Want to see on a paper press?
Yes, who owns Poinciana Paper Press, and the next is Kevante Cash. They are both poets who work with me in our poetry writing group, and we help and support each other. So I have to say, if you want to hear some amazing poetry tonight, Cindy, if you want to, expand your horizons, join us at the next event. It starts at 6, and at that event, we are going to be announcing the finalists and the winner of the poetry contest. And so the finalists in the high school category and in the university category will be reading the poems that they submitted to the contest. So with that said, I'm going to sign off from everybody. There's lots of info in the chat. It was lovely talking with you.
This is lovely, ladies. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for everybody who came.
Bye, everyone.